What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Shadowlands video. How's everybody doing? I'm still working on this mic stuff. We're keeping it really far away from me today, okay? I feel like I just keep eating the mic. So I need you all to tell me if this is better. I'm gonna keep. Oh no, it's back. Stay there. Mike, stay there. We're gonna work on this. We'll get better at it. Don't worry. What are we looking at today? Oh my gosh, we are looking at more Elemental Shaman builds moving into 9.2. Let me get my notes and everything up here. We're going to look today at Echoes of the Great Sundering, which is a legendary that no Elemental Shaman has ever crafted. I think there's a perception. Okay, there's a perception out there that I don't like the builds that are meta. And that's partially true, but I'm not going to not talk about them. I just always like to see other builds. I like it when the games have like multiple builds versus just one meta build for like 3 years straight. That's got to be better, right? When there's multiple options. So don't get me wrong. I think Echoes is a great build. We're going to get into it in a second, but I don't hate it. I just like to see other builds as well. But if you're an Elemental Shaman and you have crafted Echoes of the Great Sundering, moving into 9.2, you're going to be in a great spot. So what are we going to talk about? What does the legendary do? What's our stat priority? What are our talents? Mostly we're talking about Storm Ellie versus Fire Ellie. What's the tier set bonus do for Echoes of the Great Sundering legendary person? What's the Covenant choices? There's like 2 that are bad and 2 that are good. But there's one that's the best probably. Okay, and we'll get to that in a minute. Then we'll do some gameplay. And we'll talk about where do you want to craft this thing. Get your coffee, kick back, relax, start writing some comments about how much better the microphone is this time around, okay? If I don't see any good comments about my microphone, then I don't know, I can't do anything to you, but I'll be very upset, okay? All right? Jeepers. Okay, here we go. What does Legendary do? Well, this is the most common Legendary that almost every Elemental Shaman in Mythic Plus has crafted. If you didn't craft this, you're a bit of a troll, which means I'm a bit of a troll. I didn't really play Ellie Shaman in Mythic Plus, but here's what it says. When you cast Earth Shock, your next Earthquake will deal 120% additional damage. And the wording of that is really important. A lot of the times percentages in World of Warcraft are strange. Something might say that it does 120% more damage, but it only does like actually 20% more damage. Like if you do the actual calculation with a calculator, you'll look at it and it'll be like, instead of it doing 1,000 damage, now it's doing 1,200 damage. And you're like, well, that's only 20% stronger, even though it says 120% stronger. With Echoes of the Great Sundering, it doubles your Earthquake damage. You have to do 2.2. You have to calculate this. Whatever your damage is on your Earthquake, mine's 5,000 right now. Get the calculator out. Calculator. It's over here. You guys can't see it, but I've got it. Trust me. 5,000 times... It's not 120% isn't going to make sense in the calculator. You have to multiply it by 2.2, and that makes it 11,000 damage. That's what your Earthquake will do. So when you cast Earth Shock, your next Earthquake, instead of it only doing 5,000 damage, it will do 11,000 damage. And that's obviously just with whatever my gear is here. But just understand that the calculation there is important. It's like multiplicative versus additive, all that kind of stuff, right? This is what this is going to be. It does a lot of freaking damage. That's the point. Okay. So that's what it does. What does that mean for us? It basically just means that even in AoE situations, we have to weave in the occasional Earth Shock. It also means that Aftershock becomes mandatory, and I'll get to that in a minute. Let's just look at stat priority really, really quickly, okay? So, a lot of you guys were talking in the comments. Some of you guys were talking about on the Skybreakers build. You were like, well, stat priority for Ellie Shaman is crit. And I understand crit is obviously very good because of the interaction between Lava Burst, always critting, and it gets more damage based on your critical strike chance, which is Elemental Fury, right? It's just you just get more damage from your crits, is what I'm trying to say there, which is really, really good. Now, Earthquake critting is also really important because it's uncapped AoE, and it's just incredible. Every time this thing ticks, if it crits, you can have double the damage. Like the average Earthquake isn't going to hit for 5,000. It'll probably hit for 7, 8, sometimes 10,000 damage if you get all crits in there. So crit is incredibly important in this build. I was simply trying to say in the Skybreakers build, you get a bunch of crit for free on your Flame Shocks. And a lot of your damage is wrapped up in Flame Shock and Chain Harvest. And they both get their own crit multipliers because they get conduits. Like, there's the Chain Harvest conduit that gives it more crit. And then Skybreakers, the legendary, gives your Flame Shocks more crit. So, like, what I was trying to explain in the Skybreakers video is that you guys need to open up your minds a little bit. It's a different way of doing AoE. It isn't just like Earthshock, Earthquake, Earthshock, Earthquake, Chain Lightning, Earthshock, Earthquake. That's not what you're doing anymore. On the Skybreakers build, it's like Flame Shock damage is really high. So it's important to take Fire Elemental instead of Storm Elemental because it's all about that Flame Shock passive damage that keeps rolling through. Of course, you're still doing Earthquake and you're casting your Stormkeeper Chain Lightnings and you're doing all your other stuff, but you're getting like an extra form of AoE. You get Liquid Magma Totem as well. So it's just a different way to look at it. I understand. And what you guys were talking about in terms of crit, I just think that crit loses a little bit of value when you're playing Skybreakers because it's already giving you crit. So you might as well index into something else if you want to. Maybe more haste, maybe versatility, whatever you want. With this build, of course, crit is king. It's absolutely king because you want these double damage earthquakes to be critting as much as humanly possible. So for that reason, you're going to want to stat into crit as much as you can. Obviously, you want a certain amount of haste. Something like 37% is probably fine. And then you want to go for crit afterwards. Because Mastery doesn't affect Earthquake. You can't get like an additional proc on Earthquake, like an overload. So, and most of your damage is going to be wrapped up in this legendary in Earthquake, right? You can see, I did a test here. Look at Earthquake damage is almost 50% of our friggin' damage. I mean, it's even higher here. It is 50% of our damage. So you can see Mastery is going to be bad for you on this build. Okay, that's the stat parity. Let's move into the talents. I talked about Storm LE, Fire LE stuff really quickly. That's the main difference here that you're always going to want to look at with any of these builds is, are you taking Storm LE or are you taking Fire LE? That also depends on what Covenant you're picking, because Venthyr really enables the Fire Elemental playstyle with all the extra Flame Shocks that it's adding. Otherwise, Fire Elemental isn't really that good. If you can't get a free 5 Flame Shocks and then add your own 6th Flame Shock and have them all ticking and reducing the cooldown of Chain Harvest, like and then your Fire Elemental makes them last twice as long and makes them do damage quicker. Like, that's a real obvious synergy there. But if you're not Venthyr, it's really difficult to pull off a strong Fire Elemental build. So I would suggest for talents, for Echoes of the Great Sundering, for the Earthquake Legendary, you're going to want to set up something like this. Earth and Rage, we don't care about Lava Burst, right? When we're doing AoE. We're talking about Mythic Plus AoE. This is what you're going to do this build for. So Earth and Rage, I think, is obviously what you're going to take. Aftershock is a must. If you cast Earthshock and it refunds all the Rage, you can all the Maelstrom, you can instantly cast Earthquake. And then you've used your legendary buff just right away. Boom. Which is the only downside to this legendary is that you have to spend, 60 Maelstrom hitting that Earthshock first. And then you have to go back and then you get to cast your Earthquake. So there's like a bit of a delay there. Aftershock helps to shore that up because this procs all the time. It says 25% chance, but man, it feels like it procs like 40 or 50% of the time. So it's really, really fun to play with that. If you get an instant cast Earthshock into it refunds all of its Maelstrom and you get an Earthquake, really, really good. Stormkeeper, we're going to go Storm LE. Again, you could go Fire LE, but as I explained, if you're not Venthyr, Fire LE just loses so much value in AoE. So I think Storm LE is the play. It's just going to be the play probably no matter what. You're going to go Primal, and then you're absolutely going to go Stormkeeper because Stormkeeper enables a quick Earthshock into a quick Earthquake, right? So you do your Stormkeeper, and you press your 1 Chain Lightning, and it gives you like 70 or 80 Maelstrom. You hit Earthshock, then you press your next instant cast Chain Lightning that's buffed by Stormkeeper. You get another 80 Maelstrom, and you press your Earthquake. So it's an immediate combo. Just right away, you get an immediate combo, which is really, really good. So, Stormkeeper is an absolute must, for sure. This is the setup I think you're going to want to run. Earth and Rage, Aftershock, Stormkeeper are the must takes here, and Storm Elemental is sort of that obvious choice as well. Now, Echoes of the Great Sundering is probably the best Mythic plus Legendary right now anyway, and so what is it really gaining? I think most people were playing Night Fae already, and so what are you really gaining moving into 9.2? Well, you're getting actually quite a big gain from the Night Fae ability, which is you get 24% crit once you're done casting Fate Transfusion, and you're going to reduce the cooldown of your Elemental, which is really, really good. So we'll get to this in a minute. This is really good, but let's just go to the tier set bonus for a second, because the tier set bonus also has an interaction that is actually okay for this build. Generally speaking, the tier set bonus is kind of bad for this build, and I'll show you why in a second. Just let me take a sip here. Oh, hey, Flocked, how you doing? Okay, so here's the tier set bonus. While your Storm Elemental is active, Lava Burst deals more damage, and you get Lava Surge. Okay? That's almost irrelevant to this build. Casting Lava Burst extends Storm Ellie, or if Storm Ellie's on cooldown, Lava Burst has a 20% chance to reduce its remaining cooldown by 10 seconds. That last part is really important. It's actually really important. The last part of the 4-piece bonus. Lava Burst having a chance to give you back some cooldown on your Storm Ellie. Again, in AoE, it doesn't really matter because you're not going to be pressing Lava Burst for the most part. And you're not even going to be pressing, like, if you get a Lava Surge proc, you can press it to extend this guy a little bit, but this is not the build where you're going to get a permanent Storm Ellie. This is just not that build. This build is basically, you get Storm Elemental plus Fey Transfusion on a pull, okay? Storm Ellie into Fey Transfusion. You're doing huge crits. You get your big Echo of the Sundering Earthquakes out. You're doing big, big, big damage on this pack. The tank pulls in 10 or 15 mobs. It's wonderful. You're doing uncapped AoE. It's really, really good. On the next pack, you won't have your Storm Ellie or Fey Transfusion at all. So your combo will be significantly weaker on the next pack. But then, the pack after that, you'll have both of them up again, and you can do Storm Elemental and Fate Transfusion. So it's like every other pack you can absolutely pop off and do ridiculous amounts of damage. So it's good. That's the playstyle that I think you're going to have. Now, the tier set bonus might help to bring your Elemental back a little bit quicker, but in AoE you're not going to be pressing Lava Burst, and on top of that, you may not want your Storm Elemental back at a certain time. So, like, for example, if the Fey Transfusion, if you're casting Storm Elemental, and then Storm Elemental has, like, 30 seconds left on its cooldown, because you've been cooling it down with Lava Burst, but Fey Transfusion's up, you don't really want to press Fey Transfusion, because you're going to miss out on a huge amount of cooldown reduction. You're going to waste that. It does 6 seconds times 6, 36 seconds on the Ellie. I guess it's actually 36 seconds. I thought it was more. Sorry, it's more for the Feral Wolves. So that's actually not too bad. If you only had 30 seconds left on your Storm Ellie, you could channel Seeds of Replica. You're only going to miss 6 seconds of the cooldown reduction. But, you know, let's say you had 15 or 20 seconds left. It feels bad to press Fey Transfusion and waste some of the cooldown reduction. So that's the only thing you need to think about there is, like, let's not waste the cooldown reduction of the Fey Transfusion interaction. But the tier set bonus is interesting in the sense that it'll cool down your Elemental when it's off cooldown, which is what this build is going to be. This build is not a permanent Ellie build. This is a every other pack you're going to get your Elemental build. That's basically what it is. And the tier set bonus is largely irrelevant, but the last piece is sort of interesting. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Now, moving forward, let's move into the Covenant choice. Okay? So I think the premier Covenant choice is going to be Night Fae. Let's do that last. I'm going to explain why the other ones are bad. Kyrian is kind of just a yikes, right? Like, it's okay. But again, you're going to need to take Earth Shield to trigger the second half of Raging Vesper Vortex, right? You can consume 3 charges of the Raging Vesper Vortex buff twice. You can do it twice. 3 damage abilities and then 3 healing abilities will make this thing go off. But if you're in the middle of your Storm Elemental window, so like you do Kyrian Vesper Totem on pull into your Storm Elemental, and then you're doing Chain Lightning, Earth Shock into Earthquake, Chain Lightning, Chain Lightning, Chain Lightning, Earth Shock into Earthquake. You don't have time to press Earth Shield to trigger the second half of Raging Vesper Vortex. You just don't have time. It's not what you want to be doing in your Storm Elemental window. Imagine spending 3 GCDs in your Storm Elemental window pressing Earth Shield. It's just not ideal, right? So this is not, it's just not a good thing to take in this build especially. Splintered Elements is also not very good for this build, the Necrolord build, because you can't spread Flame Shocks. As I said before, with the Fire Elemental in their kit here, if you're going Fire Elemental, it really lends itself to a Venthyr playstyle, because the Venthyr playstyle will spread Flame Shocks for you. With Necrolord, you don't get to spread them. You can cast one by yourself, and then maybe do Primordial Wave to do a second one, and then cast a third one, and then you can do the Lava Burst proc. And, like, it's okay, but it's really not... It's just really slow. By the time you've done all that setup, the guy who's running the Night Fae build, he's already cast his Storm Ellie, and he's already channeled Fae Transfusion, and he's just blasting damage. So, like, this feels really, really bad, because you can't spread Flame Shocks. It's really unfortunate. The only real, like, fire builds for Elemental Shaman make sense with Venthyr, because you get free Flame Shocks. Enhancement Shaman, of course, can benefit from the Necrolord playstyle because it gets to spread Flame Shocks for free, but Ellie doesn't get to do that, so it's unfortunate. But so those two are kind of not super good. Venthyr is okay. The Venthyr playstyle, I'm not going to show it today, but I'm just going to show the one playstyle today because I think that the Night Fae one is the best. But the Venthyr one is interesting because it does in fact add a bunch of passive damage. You get a big chunk of Chain Harvest damage, which is great, and then you get a whole bunch of Flame Shocks out there, which is good. It's just passive damage. You could potentially run Fire Elemental with this, like as I was saying, because it's going to buff all that Flame Shock damage. And then it's essentially you're just getting like more cooldown reduction on Chain Harvest as well, because the Flame Shocks last longer and have a higher chance to crit. You don't have Skybreakers making your Flame Shocks crit, but if you just have natural crit that you've built because you're running a Echoes of the Great Sundering build, if you've built a whole bunch of crit on your own, in your own gear, then your Flame Shocks will have a higher chance to crit, which means they're going to reduce the cooldown of Chain Harvest. So then you would have a build that's like Earth Shock into Earthquake, that's your main thing, and then on the side, as a secondary source of damage, you have huge Chain Harvests with all these Flame Shocks out. And if you run Fire Elemental, then you could also have double duration Flame Shocks, and they're all ticking, and they're potentially critting and cooling down Chain Harvest. There is something there. It sort of adds a bunch of, like, extra passive damage to your kit, and it's not, like, terrible. This was nope, that's Enhance. This was it here. You can see Earthquake damage is still on the moon, right? Because that's what this does. Echoes of the Great Sundering really, really, really buffs the Earthquake damage. But you can see Chain Harvest is there. It's doing 5%, and our Flame Shocks are doing almost 6%, because of the interaction between the Fire Elemental. I had Fire Elemental out here. He's buffing your Flame Shock damage, so it's all passive. And you get Liquid Magma Totem as well if you want to take that. So you're getting all this sort of extra damage. Now, that being said, I don't think it's probably as good as the Storm Elemental one. Here's a Storm Elemental build where I'm still Venthyr, but you can see the damage coming out of the Storm Elemental is about, it's like 8 or 9%, which is good. And on the Fire side of things, I think the damage was only like 6%. If you add it all up, the Primal Fire guy, plus some of the Flame Shock damage that he was doing, it's only about like 6%. So overall, I'm going to say that for the Covenants, like, Kyrian and Necrolord are kind of no. Venthyr, there is something here. If you want to play this build, it's actually not going to be terrible. But I think the premier build is going to be Night Fae. And here's why. Each pulse of Fae Transfusion reduces your elemental's cooldown by 6 seconds. So that means that's 36 seconds, because Fae Transfusion pulses 6 times. So that's 36-second cooldown reduction. And it gives you 24% crit. That is huge. That is huge. If you have a baseline crit of like 30 or 40%, like maybe 30%, let's say realistically, you're now going up to like 55% crit. Your huge double damage Earthquakes are going to be critting all time. So this combo, Echoes plus Seeds of Rampant Growth, that I think is going to be the best way to play this build. And I think that most people sort of already knew that, but it's just a good sort of, it's good to sort of explain it and talk about why it's good. This is why crit has so much value, as well, is because you're just going to be hitting these disgustingly huge um, earthquakes, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Let's do a gameplay demo here. So that's all the covenants talked about there. Again, we're going to do this without lust. I don't know why I'm running forward. Stop moving. Stop it. On pull, you are going to summon your elemental, and then you are going to Fate Transfuse right away because you need to get the cooldown of your elemental back. Then we're just going to do our rotation. Chain Lightnings into Earth Shock into Earthquake. So let's start with Stormkeeper. Stormkeeper, Ellie, Fate Transfusion, right? There we go. Stormkeeper, Ellie, Fate Transfusion. He's all juiced. We're going to go. Earth Shock. Next channel into Earthquake. We got a reset already. Another Earth Shock. So now I have my buff ready to go. Start doing some Chain Lightnings. Earthquake. Here we go again. We're going to Earth Shock when it comes back. Earth Shock. Keep going with Chain Lightning into Earthquake. Into Earth Shock. We got a free one into Earthquake. You can see the value of that talent. Earth Shock into Earthquake. We got a free one again. Earth Shock again. Into Earthquake. See how fast our Chain Lightning's going. We're doing really good damage here. Earth Shock into Earthquake. Oh, he's gone. That's okay. Our Ellie's gone. We lost our buff. We knew that was going to happen. This is not a permanent Ellie buff. Earth Shock into Earthquake. Oh, we got to reset again. This talent is so disgusting. Aftershock is the craziest talent ever. We have our Stormkeeper coming. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to build up. We're going to cast an Earth Shock. Then we're going to Stormkeeper into a big Chain Lightning, into an Earthquake. Stormkeeper, Chain Lightning into Earth Shock. We got a free one into Earthquake. See how quickly you can get the combo off there? It's crazy. Earth Shock, free one into Earthquake. Now, Fate Transfusion's coming. We have 27 seconds on our Ellie. We're just going to press it. Okay? Even though we're wasting a tiny bit of the cooldown, we want to get this guy back. Now, we have a huge crit buff right now. So we're going to cast that. We have a big crit bonus right now. So we get all of our damage out. We go crazy here. We did an Earthquake. That's an Earth Shock into Earthquake. We got an Earth Shock buff again into another Earthquake. All this is critting, right? Like, the crits are just crazy. Got a reset right there. Aftershock is just so crazy for this build. Got it again. We got it again. Another Aftershock proc. Another one. Another one. And you just build up your Maelstrom so quick. I was overcapping there. Don't do that. But you can see that this is how quickly it goes. And our Ellie's down again. So you can see the damage is pretty insane. I want to look really quickly at the uptime on our Elemental. It's going to show me that. Maybe not, eh? Anyway, the fight was... Wait, what's happening here? It was longer than 1 minute and 30 seconds, wasn't it? Was it only 1 minute and 30 seconds? Holy moly. So, oh, there it is. 2:21. That makes more sense. I was like, there's no way it wasn't that long. So that was a 2 minute and 20 second fight. We got to do our Elemental twice. We got to do Storm Ellie twice. So that's like 1 minute and 15 seconds in terms of how the cooldown of him. He's a 3 minute cooldown, and really he's acting, he's a 2.5 minute cooldown. He's acting more like a 1 minute and 15 second cooldown. So you're kind of cutting the cooldown in half with the Fate Transfusion combo here. To a degree, right? You know, it's more or less, that's what it's looking like. Obviously, Earthquake is going to be way out in front. Huge, huge damage. You can see the Primal Lava, or the Storm Ellie guy, he's doing 1.4, so that's 5.5% plus 6, that's 11.5%. Almost 12% of our damage is just from the Storm Ellie, which is really, really great. And the rest of it, of course, we're shoving into Earthquake with the Earth Shock Earthquake combo. So that's how it works. I mean, it works the same way that it works right now on live servers. You're simply getting more crit, and you're getting the cooldown on him more as well. Now, in a real world situation, practically in a dungeon, you know, there might be stragglers. Like, you might have killed a pack of guys and there's only one enemy left or two enemies left. Then you can start weaving in some lava bursts, and you can hope that the lava bursts will proc the cooldown reduction on your Storm Ellie and get it down just a tiny bit, right? So that is what you're looking for ideally. But the tier set bonus is largely not helpful to us. It's actually not really that helpful in an AoE situation anyway. I think maybe in Mythic, in single target for a raid, it's going to be a little bit more helpful. But you're not going to run this. You're not going to run this legendary for a single target anyway. And we'll talk about wind speakers in the next video. But basically, this build lives or dies by the double legendary effect. The only bonus you're really getting is from double legendary. So as soon as 9.2 drops, right away, we're not going to be getting a huge bonus on Echoes of the Great Sundering, you know, builds, because you're not going to get a second legendary. And if you do start getting your tier set bonus, it doesn't really matter if you're doing Mythic Plus primarily. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just letting you know that early on in this X pack, your damage profile is going to like stay where it is, and everybody else's is going to sort of come up a little bit. And then once you get double legendaries, like boom, you're going to be in business, man. This thing's crazy. Yep. This thing is going to do tons and tons of damage. It's going to be great. This legendary is going to be absolutely fantastic in Mythic Plus for sure, paired up with Seeds of Rampant Growth. Again, you could go for a Venthyr build with this. I really do believe you could. It's just not quite the same. You know, the crit, pushing all that crit into the Earthquakes is just so strong. Cooling down your Ellie a little bit so that he can get out there and do more of his thing, just so strong. The damage on this only goes up with more mobs because it's uncapped AoE. So absolutely, it's a very, very strong build. And if you're looking to run Elemental Shaman in Mythic Plus in 9.2, you should probably run this build. Something like Echoes of the Great Sundering plus Night Fae or Venthyr, basically. Now, where do you want to craft this thing? Unfortunately, there's only 2 spots. I mean, most of them only have 2 spots, but this one has 2 bad spots. Shoulders and hands. Shoulders and hands are both tier set pieces. So mine are on my shoulders because I think they're less stats. Anyway, the point is, you're basically going to have to choose. If you already have this crafted on one of these slots, then just leave it there and just pray to the loot gods that you get like a tier set drop or a gear drop of any kind on a different slot. Again, the tier set bonus is not as relevant for this build. It's almost not relevant at all. So it's not going to be that huge of an impact if you craft your Echoes of the Great Sundering on your shoulders and then you get a shoulder drop in raid. Like you're going to be really sad because you wanted to get any other drop, but it's just unfortunately where the legendary can be crafted. That's it. Only the shoulders and only the hands. So pick your poison, basically. Pick your poison and put it wherever you want to put it. And that's just what you're going to be stuck doing. So that's it, guys. That's Echoes of the Great Sundering. Mythic Plus, you should run Night Fae, Seeds of Rampant Growth. You get a huge amount of crit. What are you going to do on pull? You're going to go Elemental into Fae Transfusion. You have 24% crit, and you've cooled him down a bit. You're going to have your Stormkeeper rolling, so you just go into the Storm LE damage, and you're going to do Earthshock into Earthquake. You have huge double damage Earthquakes that are critting the entire time. We managed to pull out about 20k sustained AoE. You could probably do even better if you had different gear, better stat priorities. You need to go for crit. I don't have any crit on this guy just because I have PTR gear. So just that's the build in a nutshell. It's going to work really, really well in Mythic Plus in 9.2. So absolutely, this build is more than alive. And it's going to be even better once like a month goes by and you get your double legendaries. But until then, it's still a strong build, and you can absolutely play this in 9.2. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you so much for the likes and the subscriptions. Thank you for the conversations in the comments. Let's keep talking about them down there. Let me know if the mic was better in this video. I want to keep trying to make this better for you guys so that I don't sound like a lunatic screaming into the mic all the time. Okay? Okay? All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.